Carol talked about an international commitment through the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The right to inclusive education is Article 24 of the CRPD. She also mentioned the Magna Carta, which is the Republic Act 7277, and also echoed by Professor Nolasco, are two important laws. RA 10533, which you know is the K-12 law, and 10410 explain that. And Dr. Nolasco jumped into the whole DepEd policy of MTBMLE, Mother Tongue-Based Multilingual Education, which is already being currently done for how many languages, Dr. Nolasco, are being for the MTBMLE? 17? 19 languages so far are considered mother languages. So that's it. That is the context that we're moving in. So now I'm going to talk about a different perspective, which is more from the international perspective, and these are actually views from an international NGO which is called the World Federation of the Deaf, the WFD, which was established over half a century ago and has deaf organizations all over the world as members, including the Philippine Federation of the Deaf. Okay, they are recognized by the United Nations, and maybe you have noticed that we keep on mentioning the phrase human rights keeps on coming up. So the people before you are basically advocating from a perspective of human rights. So some of you are educators, or you're looking at it from an education point of view, but we're looking at it primarily as human rights activists. So I'm going to present to you some very key excerpts, which for me, even though I've worked with the deaf for many, many years, I felt was something new. So this is what is going on in the global conversation. So how are we going to use that now that the DepEd is shifting from SPED, special education, which has been essentially segregated schooling of children with disabilities, and bring it into an inclusive setting. So inclusive from the word to include, so you're included, we're all together. Okay, so the next slide, if somebody can please press the next slide. Okay, these are some of the views expressed by the President, Colin Allen of the World Federation of the Deaf in 2015. And he said that there is a very key phrase here. If you are an education major, you should remember this phrase. It's called the sign language learning environment. Because he said it is their view of the WFD that inclusive education for deaf students all over the world must have a component of a sign language learning environment. Ano ba yung sign language learning environment na yon? It's going to be part of a system which has several components such as accessibility, universal design, non-discriminatory practices, meeting student needs, and individual support. I don't have the time to explain all of that, but the key is that there is a system which will have several components. And usually, when you ask people, how do you shift from special education to inclusive education? What is the first thing you do for deaf students? And almost always, they will say, ay, kailangan mo ng, kagaya ni Gian, kailangan ni Jay, kailangan mo ng sign language interpreter. Kasi yung deaf, paano sila mag-communicate with everybody else? Okay, but Colin Allen says the provision of professional sign language interpretation as the only measure is insufficient. Dito ko naka-double take. Ano ka mo? Hindi lang interpreter. Di ba yun na yun? If you want to have inclusive, put an interpreter. Okay na tayo. Hindi pala, according to the WFD. Because a deaf student wouldn't be able to communicate with teachers and peers without barriers. Pwedeng may interpreter ka dun sa classroom, pero kung kakausapin na yung teacher, naglalaro tayo sa playground, alam na nakabuntot lagi yung interpreter doon kasi, okay, paano mo kakausapin? Okay, so may challenge na doon. In the next slide, this is now a very important leader also of the World Federation of the Deaf. His name, these are all deaf people. Marku, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, he's Finnish, Jokinen, which last year he said, quality bilingual education requires employing teachers who are deaf, and or are qualified in sign language. Okay, this is a barrier that we need to break through, because right now there are barriers which prevent deaf teacher education graduates from teaching in the public school. Another thing he said was the national language, oops, okay, you need to move it towards that side. The National Sign Language is used as a medium of instruction and is also taught as a mother tongue subject. Simultaneously, the written language of the country is taught as a second language. Alam na natin to L1 and L2. Okay, next slide. Sign language interpreting service, again, this echoes what Colin Allen said, does not constitute a true learning environment. It doesn't just putting the interpreter there is not the same. Deaf students should be able to communicate directly with school staff and peers in sign language without relying on a sign language interpreter. And the development of inclusive education projects must be led by deaf people and their organizations. This is why we're talking about this and why we have deaf people up on the stage and we also have deaf people in the audience. Okay, we cannot leave all the decisions to be made by DepEd or the new DepEd secretary. Okay, we have to be in the conversation. Deaf people have to lead the way. Okay, so there's a lot of pressure, I think, a lot of challenge for deaf people that you should know how do we lead? What is this whole bilingual education, sign language learning environment? Okay, so this is a challenge for our deaf leaders. In the next slide, these are the views of Eva Tupi. She's also deaf. She's from Finland. She's the Human Rights Officer of the World Federation of the Deaf. And this was in 2015, and among the things that she explained, inclusive education must include full access to all aspects of formal schooling curriculum, so ibig sabihin sa loob ng classroom, and informal, such as where learning takes place between peers in and outside the classroom. 1 minute, okay. So, when we say education, it doesn't just happen in the classroom. I think we all know that. Sometimes we even learn more outside of the classroom. If you're in the playground, you're talking to your peers, maybe a lot of your education still goes on. And Eva is saying that inclusive education needs to span both those areas, formal and informal areas of learning. And the WFD actually has never really identified itself in terms of a disability perspective. It has adopted the position that deaf people are a linguistic minority, therefore they actually align themselves with minority groups, okay? And not a disability perspective, and in invoking human rights, they will invoke the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights for all minority groups, not so much the CRPD. The other thing is that state parties should facilitate the learning of sign language for the parents and siblings when they want to. Next slide. I'm going to just jump to the last one, which is that this is one of the statements in the Philippine government's commitment to the UNCRPD, which is that the state parties should facilitate the learning of sign language and promote and support the linguistic identity of deaf children and deaf community, and the deaf community. Thank you very much. Perfect.